Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman, and our next guest up is Lynn Fritzlen with Lynn Fritzlen Architecture. Welcome to Radio Entrepreneurs.
Thank you. Good morning, Jonathan.
It's a pleasure to see you. Tell us a little bit about your practice and tell our listeners about you and what it is that you do.
Well, I have an architecture firm located in Manhattan, Lynn Fritzlen Architects, that I started in 2016. And our current focus is on educational and community projects. We have a lot of fun ones. This is my second firm. My first firm I started in 2010. It's called Fritzlen Pierce Architects in Vail, Colorado. So from 1980 to 2010, that firm focused on the resort and hospitality, resort residential and hospitality market. So in 2010, I moved here to New York City to be closer to my children, which was in the end a great move. And I sold my share of the other practice, and I moved into projects that were more, what would you call it, socially responsible. It's been very rewarding. As much as I loved working in the resort market, you're dealing with discretionary income. And the projects we're working on now have our sustainability. I have a component of sustainability, accessibility for ADA. Anyway, it's been a great.
Fascinating. You've got the reverse career going on. Most people dream of retiring and going to resort towns.
I know, and I feel very
You've
lucky.
gone to the big city.
I feel very lucky. Vail kind of, I got to see it grow up. I really feel like I was part of its evolution and success.
Interesting. As an architect, and I don't want to go back too much in the future, but you must have had an opportunity to have a footprint on a smaller town back then, which has grown tremendously over the last couple of decades.
I did. It was a tremendous experience. We worked with clients from all over the world as it became an international destination, and we worked on small community projects. But in the 90s, when it became so popular, I'm thinking with the New York finance community, it really took traction. You saw the dollar amounts go. Ooh.
So tell us about your practice today in New York City. You said focus on sustainability and education. What types of specific projects have you been working on lately? And what are you seeing in the market that's shifted perhaps over the last 5 years that you've been involved in New York?
Well, for the project, we're doing several projects up at SUNY Purchase College. That facility was built in the 1970s by and it's built and designed, and there are many legacy buildings up there, so it's great to work on it. Part of modernism and brutalism. Anyway, it's great to bring them back to life. We're doing mechanical improvements in some cases, new finishes, new ADA accessible spaces, et cetera, et cetera. But the fun project we're working on is a new community theater up in Batavia, New York. And that has, as you can imagine, has gone through some ups and downs through the pandemic. Now we're moving forward with a smaller capacity theater. And we're hoping, as is the community, for it to be an economic and social focus going into the future.
And are you seeing in design, well, I was about to say post-pandemic, but as we move towards hopefully the tail end of the pandemic, are you seeing a design component that takes into consideration things like social distenting and proximity?
Yeah. So this new project, with this new project, definitely we're taking into account social distancing, ventilation rates for mechanical equipment are being retooled to address it.
Is it a challenge to incorporate the business economics of, in this case, in a community theater, and making sure, I'd imagine a theater in front of 4 people doesn't work. You need some scale and you need some mass of people to make it worthwhile for the production company. So that probably has entered into some of the discussion where perhaps historically it wasn't as big a component.
Oh, yes. But this is, this theater is part of the heart and soul of this community and has the support of the city of Batavia and the Economic Development Authority. actually the funds are actually coming from the state to do it. So it's not a business decision entirely. It's not like what Broadway is dealing with. It's about getting this community back in focus and having that shared experience.
So how did you make the transition from well, I guess similar types of projects when you were in Colorado, but New York City has got as I understand it, there's a lot of restrictions and a lot of regulations that you probably didn't have while you were in Colorado. Was that a big pivot for you?
Definitely a different regulatory environment. Fortunately, it's the same building codes. I mean, it's the International Building Code. So I got to take that with me. But I did work for 2 other firms before starting my own in 2016. So I moved to New York in 2010. So I did have an opportunity to work for a couple of different institutional clients. The one I enjoyed the most was the New York City Housing Authority. We did an feasibility of studies and analysis after Hurricane Sandy, and trying to help these projects get back to a habitable condition. I found that very rewarding. I mean, that was it was devastating to the whole city, but it was really devastating to people in public housing.
So I have an interesting question to ask, or at least I think it's interesting, given that you've been an entrepreneur for many, many years. And then when you transitioned, it sounds like you went to work, I would assume the New York Housing Authority, very large organization. How did you pivot and make that transition from owner, partner, entrepreneur to employee? And then what created that spark to get back into entrepreneurship? So you've come full circle, but it's an interesting transition. And I think a lot of people sort of say, hey, I've been an entrepreneur for so long, I can't work for anybody else.
I have a theory that every decade, you need to change it up a little bit. And if you don't change it up every decade, then by the time you get to the 3rd decade, you really need to change it up. So that was it was a point in my life where I really needed to change professionally and personally. And it turned out to be it was very challenging. I don't want to say it wasn't challenging, but it was, fortunately my prior career had informed me well to be able to take on a new job, to take on new challenges. And I was grateful for that. One thing that has served me well is I've always loved technology. And in fact, my current office, we're 100% remote. All of our servers are 100% in the cloud. And we have, just embraced the technology around remote working. I think my employees are a little younger than I am. I think they're a little more comfortable with it on a day-to-day basis than I am. Every once in a while I go, oh, is it really there? But it's all good. And I'm glad to have those tools in my toolbox.
So fascinating that you your endeavor. It sounds like pre-pandemic you really were a virtual organization, or moving towards a virtual organization in a lot of respects.
We were. In fact, I even spoke at the New York State AIA convention about it, and I kind of got booed out of there. This was like 2 years ago, and they well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there was a lot of architects there going, well, we need to mentor these people. They need to sit side by side so that we can show them how to draw building sections.
As if people are drafting on a drafting bench anymore.
I know, and it was like, well, it's not that isn't exactly the way it works anymore. So it was, in fact, that presentation was so well received, we ended up doing it again in Long Island. And I guess, it was a precursor to where I'm at today.
And are you finding that, the profession has moved a lot towards collaborative tools so that you can work remotely, but collaboratively? Because I know there's a big piece of, one would argue there's a creative element that comes to, through collaboration and dialogue, et cetera.
Yeah, the tools available now are incredible on every level, from the building information modeling. We can work in the cloud on shared files, to all the new meeting software. We work on Microsoft Teams. There's just so much available now. You have to pick and choose. And the other thing that's amazing to me, having started out so long ago in 1980, it's so affordable compared to what we had to pay for technology services back in the 80s and 90s.
Now, what do you think? What do you see on the horizon for architecture? Do you see? I know a lot of people are looking for streamlined processes and streamlined development. Do you think that hurts the art to some degree? Looking for, everybody wants everything yesterday.
I think that's a good point. You do wonder how much it's going to create, how much it's going to curb real creativity. Where does that come from? What I do think for architecture is all of us in the design profession are going to shift to what I call maybe more urgent questions of energy conservation, safety, on health. I think we'll still see great designs coming out, but I think that we're facing a changing world, and there's a lot to be addressed in terms of climate change, environmental conservation, longevity of materials, cradle to grave projects. There's a lot.
Excellent. So there's a lot to digest there, and we'll be sure to follow up with you and see how some of these things have panned out over the year.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Excellent, Lynn. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Name of my firm is Lynn Fritzlen Architect. My website is lynnfritzlen.com. My personal email is lynn@lynnfritzlen.com, but also my staff is on there as well. And my best way to reach me these days is on my mobile, 347-494-8174. We also have an office number that redirects calls, which is 646-921-2285.
Excellent. Our guest on Radio Entrepreneurs has been Lynn Fritzlen, owner and principal of Lynn Fritzlen Architecture in New York City. It's been a pleasure having you on Radio Entrepreneurs. And we'll be right back with another guest on Radio Entrepreneurs.